So let's read chapter 21, first 7 verses.
Yahweh treated Sarah as he had said, and he did what he had promised her. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time God had promised. Abraham named the son born to him Isaac, the son to whom Sarah had given birth. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has given me cause to laugh. All who hear about this will laugh with me.
Yeah, okay, also 7, she added, whoever would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne a son in his old age. If we just superficially look at that passage, the name Isaac is named too many times. You see, it was really, that passage could have been rewritten and would be quite well with skipping few times the word Isaac. Correct? You see that?
Yes.
Easily. That's called, the trick is called the counter text. How else would have, so when you see that counter text without mentioning Isaac so many times would work very well, you may wonder why the author mentioned Isaac so many times. Was probably one reason was to remind us of laughter, because Isaac means laughter. So if you were listening that in original Hebrew, you would hear laughter, laughter, laughter. That's one thing. But also, as we continue to read from verse 8, a story about Hagar and Ishmael. And you may see in the following passage, Ishmael is not named at all, not once, I think. And Hagar is also mentioned by name very minimally, just to be clear which one is Hagar, which one is Sarah. But mostly she was referred to as slave girl. And this naming technique is to author try to help us that we attach our attention to the one who is named, to Isaac and Sarah and Abraham, and to disconnect our feelings from the one who is not named, from Ishmael and from Hagar, because they go out of the story. Let's read from verse 8.
The child grew and was weaned, and Abraham gave him a great banquet on the day Isaac was weaned. Now Sarah watched the son that Hagar the Egyptian had bore to Abraham, playing with her son Isaac. Drive away that slave girl and her son, she said to Abraham. This slave girl's son is not to share the inheritance with my son Isaac. This greatly distressed Abraham, because the slave girl's child too was his son. But God said to him, do not distress yourself on account of the boy and your slave girl. Do whatever Sarah says, for Isaac is the one through whom your name will be carried on. But the slave girl's son I shall also make into a great nation, for he too is your child. Early next morning, Abraham took some bread, a skin of water, and giving them to Hagar, put the child on her shoulder and sent her away. She wandered off into the desert of Beersheba. When the skin of water was finished, she abandoned the child under a bush. Then she went and sat down in a distance, about a bow shot away, thinking, I cannot bear to see the child die. Sitting at a distance, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. What is wrong, Hagar? He asked. Do not be afraid, for God has heard the boy's cry in his plight. Go, pick the boy up and hold him safe, for I shall make him into a great nation. Then God opened Hagar's eyes. She saw a well, so she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy. He grew up and made his home in the desert, and he became an archer. He made his home in the desert of Haran, and his mother got him a wife from Egypt.
So did you notice how this text intentionally avoid naming Ishmael? It's almost obvious isn't?
Yeah.
And so it's again showing the subtlety of the author trying to paying attention how we will feel about the text. So not to be attached to the boy, but to focus our attachment to Abraham and Sarah and Isaac. Make sense? You see that?
Mhm.
Yeah. I have a question, Father.
Good.
On chapter 14, on verse 14 there, where it says that Hagar put the child on her shoulder and sent her away because he was 13 when
That's what I was
Isaac was born, and Isaac and him are playing, so Isaac must be a year or so old.
Yeah.
So he's 13, at least 13, 14 years old. Why would they say she put him on her shoulder? Does that mean something?
I never noticed that part. I would need to see. I didn't notice rabbis mentioning anything on that. They are usually attentive on every detail, and I didn't find any rabbi commenting on that detail. If I find something, I'll come back and tell you. For I never contemplated this. Later on, we'll comment something on that age of 13. Now, when we come in chapter 12, 22, with sacrifice of Isaac, that will be important there. But here I don't see what would be the reason. Yeah.
Well, another thing, when it says that she put him under a bush, a 13-year-old boy isn't going to sit under the bush. He's going to run to his mom and say, hey, you're not leaving me behind.
Yeah, actually, you may be right that the text is written not as he is 13-year-old. That would be the best explanation. That text doesn't fit with the age given there, and we should not be surprised. We said that they are not paying too much attention on the age.
If Abraham was 100, what's 13?
Yeah. I mean, what we know, we don't know exact age of Abraham. The Bible says it was 100, but we know that many of these numbers are taken symbolically. And what we know as biological fact that Sarah's period has ended. So that's, even if we don't know the age, we know biological fact which tells us something about the age of Sarah. Make sense?
Yep.
Good. So I will go through some of the Jewish commentaries if I see. Usually the Catholic commentaries would not pay attention on such little details. Rabbis pay attention to every single word.
Well, so often it means something, and every little thing means something. Yeah. So I wondered if it meant something that I was just missing.
Yeah, it might be that it meant something. I didn't before that detail. I did read some of the commentaries on that passage, but I didn't see it.
Is this the last we hear of Ishmael and Hagar? Is in that verse?
Yes. This is last time we'll see. I think no. Ishmael will appear later on the funeral of Abraham together with Isaac. They will be together at that moment. Now, let's read chapter 22. This time I will not tell you ahead of time what you have to pay attention. So you pay attention, even if I don't tell you. Okay? But it will be similar naming technique. Similar thing in the chapter 21, they avoided mentioning the name of Ishmael and almost a little bit less name of Hagar. Here, there are two words which repeat too often. So let's see if you catch that. Let's read chapter 22, at least till, we have to read first 19 verses.
It happened sometime later that God put Abraham to the test. Abraham, Abraham, he called. Here I am, he replied. God said, take your son, your only son, your beloved Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, where you are to offer him as a burnt offering in one of the mountains which I shall point out to you. Early next morning, Abraham saddled his donkey and took with him two of his servants and his son Isaac. He chopped wood for the burnt offering and started on his journey to the place which God had indicated to him. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Then Abraham said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I are going over there. We shall worship and then come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering, loaded it on Isaac, and carried with his own hands the fire and the knife. Then the two of them set out together. Isaac spoke to his father Abraham. "Father," he said. "Yes, my son," he replied. "Look," he said, "here are the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham replied, "My son, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering." And the two of them went on together. When they arrived at the place that God had indicated to him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood. Then he bound his son and put him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of Yahweh called to him from heaven. "Abraham, Abraham," he said. "Here I am," he replied. "Do not raise your hand against the boy," the angel said. "Do not harm him, for now I know you fear the fear of God. You have not refused me, your own beloved son." Then looking up, Abraham saw a ram caught in the thorns in a bush. Abraham took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. Abraham called this place Yahweh Provides, and hence the saying today, "On the mountain Yahweh provides." The angel of Yahweh called Abraham a second time from heaven. "I swear by my own self," Yahweh declares, "that because you have done this, because you have not refused me, your own beloved son, I will shower blessings on you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the grains of the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will gain possession of the gates of their enemies. All nations on earth will bless themselves by your descendants, because you have obeyed my command." Abraham went back to his servants, and together they went out of the Beerseba, and Abraham settled in Beerseba.
Now is the question, what are the naming technique here emphasized?
The son.
Son and the father. Then Abraham verse, take your son, your only son, beloved Isaac. I mean, really overdoing it, come on. And constantly this relationship. Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham, father. To his father Abraham, and then says father. He could easily say Isaac spoke to Abraham or to father, but we hear it two times. Yes, my son, and so on. It's a constant repetition, father, son, reminding us constantly that it is father bringing his beloved son to sacrifice him. Also, as we are going to see, I'm sure some of you know, Isaac here, who carries the wood on which he is going to be sacrificed, is foreshadowing of which figure in New Testament?
Cross, Jesus.
Jesus Christ. As Jesus Christ carries the cross up to the hill of Calvary, in same way here we see Isaac carrying the wood on which he is going to be sacrificed up to the mount which God has shown me. And I bet some of you remember, I know I was speaking, which mountain is that? Where is that place where Abraham sacrificed his son?
Did they call it Mount Moriah, but that actually was Calvary, they think?
No, actually the Jewish people believe that the place where Abraham made altar later on was the place where was altar of Temple of Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
They believe this is the same place. They don't have any proof. We don't have any proof, but that's the Jewish legend. Okay, so the place where Abraham made altar to sacrifice Isaac, then I don't know how many hundred years later, if our dating is right, the earliest, the latest that Abraham was there was 1400 years before Christ, and David lived in 1000 years before Christ, so probably temple was built 1000 or 900 years before Christ, somewhere there. Okay, so that is about 500 years before the temple.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
With all the proof in the Bible, you know, look, like the story of Abraham and sacrificing Isaac, and all of it, how it parallels Jesus and his sacrifice. And all throughout the Bible, there's so many parallels. How can the Jewish people and elders, how can they not make the connection?
I'm Googling the answer. St. Paul says, let's see, in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 14.
Oh, their minds were closed.
So let's start from verse 12.
With a hope like this, we can speak with complete fearlessness, not like Moses, who put a veil over his face so the Israelites should not watch the end of what was transitory. But their minds were closed, indeed, until this very day. The same veil remains over the reading of the Old Testament. It is not, if it is not lifted, for only in Christ is it done away with. As it is to this day, whenever Moses is read, their hearts are covered with a veil, and this veil will not be taken away till they turn to the Lord. Now this Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And all of us, with our unveiled faces like mirrors reflecting the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the image that we reflect in brighter and brighter glory. This is the working of the Lord, who is the Spirit.
This is the spiritual explanation. There is veil over their hearts, veil over their minds, which prevents them to see. You can see it even in our churches. There are people who are stuck in their way of Christianity as they learn it in the first grade, and they don't allow their knowledge of God to increase. They always stay on the same level. They don't allow anything and it is not new, whatever we preach to them. It's just developing from what they learned in the first grade when they were receiving the first communion. Many our Catholics come to the parishes like in the first communion dress. It's too small. Their faith of the first communion doesn't fit to the events of the time of today. Yet they don't want to hear anything. They still believe in God who will punish them if they chew on the host or something like that. You know, God who is there to punish them, God who is there to, I don't know, whatever are the different false beliefs of the people which they don't want to abandon because they learned that as children. And many times these beliefs were not false. It is like when your child is small, you don't give him the full truth because it cannot understand the full truth. You give them pieces of truth and he has to learn more to put all this truth together. The Israelites often don't want to abandon what they have learned in their faith to see the fullness of truth given in Christianity. One reason might be that the biggest obstacle for them, for sure, is believing that Jesus Christ is God. Even the apostles had a problem with that. They believed, mind you, I was saying so many times, people of Israel were only people on planet Earth at that time who believed there is only one God. They have the prayer, which they repeat several times a day. Listen, Israel, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your strength. People of Israel, it is nailed from the childhood in their mind There is only one God. The Lord is one, the Lord is one, the Lord is one. I repeat it several times a day, every day. And then to these people of Israel, that only people on planet Earth to believe there is only one God, Jesus Christ comes and he prays to his Father in heaven, and then he reveals he is God. You can believe that. It is confusing. Let's see how confusing is at the end of chapter of Matthew, last chapter of Matthew 28. Okay, who will read from verse 16 and 17?
But the 11 disciples went into Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had directed them to go. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted.
You see, they had clear indications. I'm not going now to spend time to, unless you really want, we can go there, digression, how we see the divinity of Christ, how he showed his divinity to the disciples. And now after the resurrection, they believe they figure out he's God. But everything what I have learned till now in their Jewish faith resists that knowledge. You understand? Even the disciples who have seen him raising the dead, even the disciples who have heard him forgiving the sins and have seen the proof that his words have effect to heal and to forgive the sins, even the disciples who have heard him say, before Abraham was, I am, and didn't doubt that. Even all these disciples that had difficulty to worship Christ, to accept actually themselves, to put in the practice the belief that Christ is God, because they know there is God in heaven. So this is the problem of the Jews to accept Christianity. It's not just to believe that Christ fulfills all the prophecies as Messiah, but also to believe that he's not just the one sent by God, he is also God himself. Did I over-explain it?
No.
Or is there a more question on that? So, since we are here in chapter 22 of Genesis, let's go back there, and we see how that because we don't know how much time we are going to have in this Bible class, how far we are going, I will give you the next instance, another man who is foreshadowing Jesus Christ in the Old Testament. Who remembers who is that? Still in Genesis.
Melchizedek?
Oh, no, Melchizedek is different way. He is the priest and king. His Messiah will be priest in order of Melchizedek. But one of the, how I would say, the patriarchs, he's not really fully patriarch. One of the descendants of Isaac, Jacob, one of the sons of Jacob, will be also the foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. And
Joseph?
Joseph, exactly. And why Joseph? What is indication that he will be? Because he is beloved son of his father. That's immediately here. Isaac is defined as the beloved son of Abraham. Later on, Joseph will be shown as the beloved son of Israel. And that's already should give us hint that Joseph will be the foreshadowing of Christ. Same as Jesus had 12 apostles. Okay, that's a bit slight difference. There are 12 brothers, and Joseph is one of the 12. And same as Jesus was sold by Judas, also in case of Joseph, Judah was the one who initiated the idea to sell him as a slave. I think that Joseph was sold for 20 pieces of silver, Jesus for 30. So there is slight difference. And there is this descent, Jesus Christ descended from heaven, beloved son of the Father descended from heaven, and then was put in torture, killed, and then he descended into hell and rose rose and now he's seated at the right hand of the Father. And Joseph descended from his father into Egypt as a slave, then in prison, I don't know how many days in prison, more than 3 days. Then he ascended and he became second in the kingdom of Egypt. So there is the parallel also with what happened to Joseph and what happened to Jesus. Everybody see that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so, and the key to understand that Joseph will be that character is that he is beloved son of his father. There should, and I'm almost sure there are more questions on Abraham sacrificing Isaac. Let me hear the questions. Okay, question which always repeats, how could God say to Abraham, go and sacrifice my son?
Yeah.
That always comes. And the answer is already in the first line. It happened sometime later that God put Abraham to the test. First sentence there, it should help us that our feelings, our affections, our attention is not on Isaac, because we know it is test. Abraham doesn't know. Our attention should be on Abraham if we have paid attention to the first sentence. So the center of the story is not if Isaac will be sacrificed. We already know after this sentence, Isaac will not be sacrificed. It is just a test. It was never intention of God to actually come to the point to sacrifice Isaac. There were only two possible solutions. Either Abraham says, no, I will not sacrifice Isaac. Well, that's just my opinion. God might have said then, okay, you will not sacrifice it, but you will you will see that then you cannot have Isaac. You don't have control over it. Or because Abraham was ready to sacrifice Isaac, then God says, okay, you don't need to do it. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, makes perfect sense. I see what you're saying.
So it was never intention for Isaac to be sacrificed. It was just intention that we, the readers, God knew the result ahead of time, because God lives outside of time, that Abraham can see he had to struggle with the temptation in him to resist God in order to have that faith. It's not just faith which you have in the pocket like a brick. You have to face temptation, struggle temptation, and for sure, you knew that he had temptation to resist God. He had to struggle with that temptation in order actually to have faith. His faith is different before this test and after this test. After, you see, this test of when he was tested, it is not that God may find how much. Through this test, Abraham's faith grew because he was fighting with his temptation to resist God. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
We go through that every time we battle with sin.
Exactly. Oh, that's a good point. Let's go to James chapter 4. So we will read verses 7 and 8.
Okay. God opposes the proud, but he accords his favor to the humble. Give in to God, then resist the devil, and he will run away from you. The nearer you go to God, the nearer God will come to you.
So that's what happens here with the fighting temptation. When you said fighting temptation, that's what happens. You resist the devil, and the devil escapes from you. You go closer to God, and God comes closer to you. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I'm just making the connection with the donkey. The donkey was mentioned a lot in that.
Where donkey was carrying the wood until they came to the mountain, and then Isaac was carrying the wood. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So that shows us that Isaac was a young boy. According to the Midrash, he was about 13, and usually that number is because that's entering into adulthood in Jewish mentality. You do the rite of entering into faith, becoming an adult at that time, bar mitzvah.
And Jesus entered into Jerusalem on a donkey on Palm Sunday.
yes, yes,
He also was the sacrifice. He entered into Jerusalem
yeah,
riding on a
yes.
donkey.
He was coming to the temple, yeah, on the same place on the donkey. But that was to fulfill the prophecy of, I forgot which one. Let me read it, find it. Prophecy where it says that, let me open Palm Sunday here.
The ass and the colt.
Yes, I'm looking, where is that here in the,
I thought I had it out here in my book, but I don't see it.
it's from prophet Isaiah. Say to the daughter Zion, look, your king is approaching, humble and riding on a donkey, and on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden. So Jesus entered Jerusalem on the donkey to fulfill that prophecy. So
But
yes,
but the same comparison then falls to the same thing. Well, the donkey and Abraham carried wood,
mhm.
but it still carried the wood of the cross.
It's like a foreshadowing of what was to come.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Here was more specifically the reason why Jesus did was not so much to connect with the Abraham sacrifice, although we can still do it, but the gospel tells us main purpose was to remind people on the prophecy of the prophet Isaiah. So, and there was this midrash saying that Isaac was 13-year-old, and at that point Abraham would be, if we don't know exact age, but according to the Bible, he would be 113. And so whatever age he was very, very old. This young boy would easily be able to push the old guy down the mountain and to escape.
Right.
So according to the Jewish legend, Midrash, Isaac said to the father, tie me fast, because if I resist, the sacrifice will not be accepted. If out of the fear, I resist. So that shows that Isaac participated in the sacrifice willingly, offered himself so that's the faith which was born there. Okay, let me see. We don't have anything more to say here. I don't know if we should go to something else, unless you don't have question. Let's just browse through what follows. So in next chapter, Sarah died, I think.
Chapter
And
23.
yes, and then in chapter 24, Isaac is married. We can just mention that's the short story. I will just say, Abraham sent, let's read that. Chapter 24, the first 9 verses.
By now Abraham was an old man, well on in years. And Yahweh had blessed Abraham in every way. Abraham said to the senior servant in his household, the steward of all his property, place your hand under my thigh. I am going to make you swear by Yahweh, God of heaven, God of earth, that you will not choose a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live, but will go to my native land, my own kinsfolk, to choose a wife for my son Isaac. The servant asked him, what if the girl does not want to follow me to this country? Should I then take your son back to the country from which you came? Abraham replied, on no account are you to take my son back there. Yahweh, God of heaven, God of earth, who took me from my father's home and from the land of my kinsfolk, and who promised me on oath, I shall give this country to your descendants. He will now send his angel ahead of you so that you can get a wife for my son from there. If then the girl refuses to follow you, you will be quit of this oath to me. Only do not take my son back there. And the servant placed his hand under the thigh of his master Abraham and swore to him that he would do it.
Now comes the strange part of the story. And
That's
I
not really
guess
strange. Why would the servant be picking the wife?
because Abraham doesn't want to leave the land which was promised to him, he is bound by God to stay there. Isaac is not supposed to leave the land. So, and he doesn't want to have the wife of somebody who lives in this area, the people who sacrifice their children to God. You understand?
Yeah.
The Canaanites, they have the god Moloch, and they would sacrifice their children to God. And that's why God will give their land to people of Israel.
Okay.
So main reason, which will be repeated in the Bible several times, is because they do human sacrifices. They say that's why the land will be taken away from them. Abraham see it as important and that was also the custom of the time, to be married within your tribe, not with, if ever possible, not to look for wife in. And to find a wife, so Isaac is not searching wife for himself. Wife will be found and will be given to him. It's the way how they did it at the time.
So back up one thing. So at this point in time, Abraham is in Beersheba, living near Beersheba?
Yeah, that's in the promised land, in what is now Israel.
Okay, and where is he sending this servant to?
Back to where Abraham came from, to Ur.
To Ur. Okay.
Or Haran.
Yeah, now I see. Okay, now I see.
He sends it back to his own family. Okay?
Okay.
But, and later on, Jacob will go there to the family when he escapes from his brother Esau. They will have another contact with the family.
I guess I don't understand. If God sent Abraham from there to the promised land, why do they all keep going back there?
Well, only to get the wife. They don't
why?
want.
That doesn't make sense if the promise. I just
Yeah, the problem is that will be expressed several times, especially with the people of Israel, as they come back to the promise, as they come from Egypt to promised land. God will tell them, you have to kill all the nations, especially never do marriage with the nations which are there, because their wives will be trapped for your children. They will lead them away from God.
And they did.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's what there will be hundreds of midrashes of Balak. If you remember Balak, who was called by King Abimelech to curse Israel. You remember that one?
Okay.
And Balak or Balaam? I'm confused with the names. Okay, I would keep Balak. Probably I'm right. I don't know. The prophet, he was paid, curse Israel, but God didn't allow him to curse, and he blessed Israel 7 times, I think. Every time he blessed Israel, and king says, okay, it didn't work from here, come on another place, maybe God will allow you to curse him from another place. And every time Balaam blessed Israel. And according to midrashes, then Balak incited people of that nation, that was, I don't know which nation was, to send their women to Israel, that they may sin with the women, and then curse will fall on Israel. And they sin, and so that's how the sin enters into Israel. And then they were open for idolatry. Once they start to love the women who love idolatry, they open themselves for idolatry and so on. So that's the reason why Abraham wants the woman from his own tribe. At least they were all polytheists there, but at least these women, we see that were idolaters still, when Jacob married Leah and Rachel, and they have idols hidden in their baggage. You remember that?
Yep.
So they did have use idols, but at least they were not offering human sacrifices. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the reason. And I didn't study again yet that part, so I didn't go through all the commentaries and midrashes. Didn't see what rabbis say on that. But the common sense understanding is that Abraham doesn't want that his family mixes with the faith of the people around him, at
Okay.
least. Yeah. So, but the strange part of the story here, and we'll finish there, that you will find it, nobody asked me about the strange thing, what it means, put your hand under my thigh.
I wondered about that.
Okay, now you will be even more surprised. That's euphemism for touching the testicles.
Really?
Really.
Oh my.
And
Okay.
yes, okay. And even more, you will see that from the word testimonial, and testicles are connected from there, from that custom.
You know too much of this stuff, Father.
You see where the
my.
word testimonial comes from.
Okay. That's quite a
You're not sure if you wanted to know that.
well,
It makes sense.
is that a normal practice back in that time to
I didn't
testify?
read much about that, but yes, one commentary said that it was normal practice.
Wow. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. So I have to go, let's pray.